Excited. So, if I'm not connected with you already, my name is Andre Bright. I am an architect, a dancer, and an executive coach. And one of the things I do as an executive coach is I focus in on ways to help businesses plug what I call the holes in the retention bucket. And one of the things I found from doing that is that there's another pandemic going on, and this is by the name of burnout. I wanted to do this series called ICDANE. ICDANE, ICDANE, is I can do anything, not everything. The idea around burnout, and a lot of it is taking on too much, feeling this prolonged stress. And if we were to go by definition, Frederick, um, the definition was really by the American psychologist Herbert Freudenberger, and it broke it down into three parts. So there is emotional exhaustion, there is effectively emotional detachment, and then there's the idea of reduced personal achievement. And I'm going to break those three down in a few minutes. But for me personally, I realized that my understanding of burnout was a little bit lacking, right? Until I really started to do more research. And then I started to find it coming up within clients. And it was when I really started to see the personal experiences, the stories, that I realized there's so much more to this that people just aren't aware of. And what happens is a lot of people are experiencing a lot of the symptoms without realizing what it is that they're experiencing overall, which means that when it comes to finding solutions, when it comes to looking at tools and things that will help them get out of it, if you don't know what it is, if you can't accurately identify, then it means it takes longer to come up with a solution. And you might be doing things that might help part of it, but not all of it. So I wanted to create this series, and there's a few ways that it's coming out. One is a audio room series on LinkedIn. So all of you on LinkedIn, you'll probably be aware of this already. For 5 weeks, I'm bringing amazing guests, and we're discussing the topic of burnout in all its different sections individually. So there's a few weeks of that left. There's also this. This is a series I'm doing separately, which is just me, and it's going to be every 6 o'clock in the morning for the month of May. And I'm breaking it down into 31 different areas or really specific topics that I'm going to cover every day, so that by the time you get to the end of it, you have a lot of bite-sized pieces of information that you can use to help you through burnout. And then there's the program. So that one is a 12-week group coaching program and one-to-one coaching program. There's capacity for 8 people within the group and 4 one-to-ones. And that's going to be from June for 12 weeks. So if you're interested in any of that, you can get in touch with me directly. If you're on LinkedIn, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Instagram, then you can find me, DM me, and we can discuss that and how you can get involved in any further part of that, if you are experiencing it or if you know people who are. What I would encourage you to do actually is, if there's something that comes up that you find is valuable, maybe you didn't know about it before, one is digest that, process it, see where it sits with you. But two, if there's someone who you know who's going through it, share it with them. One of the things that I found about social media and just information in general, we're in that age now, is that sometimes we can find ourselves a little bit feeling a bit weird about sending information to people, and you don't want to bombard them. But what is on the other side of that is when we find out that there's something I'm going through that someone I care about knew about, but they didn't share something with me that could help, that can affect me too. So don't be that person. If there's something you genuinely find valuable about what is being shared on any of these platforms that I'm doing, and you know someone who it can help, share it with them. So let's talk a little bit more about it. So burnout itself is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion. So it's not just about having too much to do, as is popularly coined and is popularly used. I think for me anyway, the way I first saw it used a lot was the idea that, oh my gosh, I'm tired, I've got too much on my plate, and I'm running towards a wall, right? Um, but actually, it's not just a matter of, again, too much to do. It can be physical exhaustion, so your body becomes tired, your function starts to falter. You It can come up in stress is like a form of uh, what can we say about stress? It's tension, right, within the body. You're under some kind of pressure, you're under some kind of threat or danger. That's what your body's telling you to yourself. And after a while, this can show up in physical ailments. You might have headaches, you might have rashes, you might have cold sores, whatever it might be. Those things come up in your body. And what happens is, over a prolonged period of time, this can have a really detrimental effect on your health. It can also have emotional symptoms. So this might be that you become uh, less caring, right? You're fed up a lot of the time. Your personality changes. You can find yourself in a situation where you have less capacity to connect with people. The things that you found exciting, no longer find exciting. You get bored easily. You're not empathetic in a way that you used to be. All those things can be part of burnout too. And then the third part is the mental exhaustion. So you're mentally tired. You can't think properly. You forget your keys and things like that. You find yourself going through a state of in terms of mental exhaustion. It can find itself in a situation where you can't process information, like you'll forget things and things like that as well. The three elements of burnout is actually worth focusing on those three, just to break those down as well. I talked about emotional exhaustion just now and what that can look like. There are different ways that can show up in people, right? So in some ways, for me, for example, it can come out as shut down. So I've gotten to a stage where emotionally, I heard this great definition, which is where you care too much for too long, right? And I really love that example, because it can be that way. You've taken on other people's burdens, you've taken on the burdens of the world and social justice issues, and you feel pressure over time, and it's gotten to the point where you've reached your capacity, and then you snap, you cut out, you short circuit, and then you don't feel anything at all. And so that's what emotional exhaustion could be. You're just tired of feeling for so long. But it could also be on the other side of the scale, where you become hypersensitive. You feel everything, and that becomes overwhelming as well. The second one, which is depersonalization, for me, is where you become emotionally detached, which is similar to what I just spoke about, where you become cynical and you think to yourself, nothing really matters anymore, and you just stop caring. And that part can be a very real um, outcome of that as well. The third part is reduced sense of personal achievement, and that looks like feeling like nothing you do really matters. So it doesn't matter if I do anything, it won't change anything. So I won't do anything. And there's no point in doing that, because it's not going to make any difference really. Or specifically, my input won't make any difference really. And so, and then you've got, for me personally, this is the way I've done the LinkedIn audio series. I've also put overwhelm as a separate section, because once you get to the bottom of that, so you've got first stage, or not first stage, because they're not necessarily in stage one, aspect of it being emotional exhaustion. You're tired, you've cared too much for too long, you don't have the capacity to feel anymore. Then you get to the point of emotional detachment, so you just don't care, right? So you become cynical, and you're like, oh no, but what's the point really? And then you get to the point where you have reduced sense of personal achievement, so it's nothing that you do matters, and there's no point in getting up in the morning, there's no point in doing anything at all. And then at the end of it, then you get overwhelmed. The reason why I do it in that order is that by the time you get through the first three, overwhelm can look like, I don't have the energy to pick up that sock off the floor. Because we all know that we have the capacity to do something as a small task, but we don't have the capacity to do those things. I find it's one thing looking at overwhelm, like you have 100 things to do, and it's another thing of being so drained that even the simplest thing you can't do. So I find that a lot of people attach the idea of overwhelm to the first example, so that when it gets to the second example, they don't realize that that's part of it as well. So I just wanted to share that in particular. When it comes to the causes of burnout, a lot of things can affect that. It can be work related stress and having too much to do, for example, too much capacity, too much to do in too little time. It can also be too little to do in too much time. So boredom. So your brain, your body is in active mode, but there's nothing to channel it into, and so you feel this tension, this vibration within your body, but there's nowhere to go. And through prolonged period of time, that can cause stress, which can cause burnout as well. It can be caused by trauma. So something which is highly reactive has happened to you. It can be something that happened to you in a moment or over a prolonged period of time. So chronic trauma as well. And that has created some pressure within you. And that over time has caused this slow, sometimes fast breakdown in your emotions, in your mental capacity, in your physical ailments. All right. It can also be in a sense of irritability, in I mentioned on personal expectations. There we go. So, for example, if you feel like you need to be doing 1,001 things and you find yourself not being able to achieve that, that can cause emotional burnout as well. It can have a huge impact on your well-being. So right now, well-being is becoming a buzzword, right? So the idea of like your wholeness. So it's not just your physical health, it's your mental health, it's your emotional health, it's your financial health, and it's how we experience our lived experience. So it can have a negative impact on that. And so it can, and I find that all these things are related. So what you might find is you've got this idea called the wheel of life. So you have your, depending on how you do it, you have 5 to 9 areas of your life which you can rate between 0 to 5 or 0 to 10, and it can give you an idea of where you're strong in this moment and where you're need help in this moment. So you might have a situation in time where you're really strong financially or career wise and things are going great, but emotionally, in terms of your relationships, things are failing, right? You might find a burnout can affect you in any one of those areas. Like, is it affecting your relationship with your spouse and your children? Is it affecting your relationship with God or nature? Or can you, is, even going out in the woods doesn't have an effect on you anymore, or being by water, which is my personal thing. Like for me personally, when it comes to ways to help with self-care, for example, being around large bodies of water, the sea, rivers, that kind of thing, can help soothe my nervous system, my emotional system. Like, it calms me. And so when it comes to looking at what to do about burnout, it's good to pay attention to those kind of things. What we can sometimes have is that we feel so much for such a long period of time that we don't know where to start, in terms of we can't think about what to do to get us out of it. Sometimes we need external help, finding a therapist, finding a coach, speaking to someone who is close to us, our family, friends, even our bosses. Like, is it something you can navigate with them to say, look, I'm struggling here. I'm going to need help to share this burden. And I don't know how long it will take, but is there a way for me to get time off? Is there a way to spend more time with you? Because I know that when I'm with you, I feel calm, you relax my soul, that kind of thing. Is it a situation where you feel need more connection? Let's say, for example, you do have at the stage of depersonalization, and you're in need of connection. Is it a matter of finding people who are closest to you, who mean the most to you, and spending more time with them? You know, is it a realization that actually you haven't been spending enough time in a state of meditation or prayer? Is it that You need to be, maybe it's a situation where you actually need to feel like you're achieving something. So if you have a decreased sense of achievement, maybe you need to go back to doing things like a hobby, or taking something off your to-do list, or celebrating yourself already. There's lots of different ways to approach these things. Um, it affects your, there is an element of risk I do want to talk about though as well. Um, when it comes to, especially people in high pressure working environments, there's this element of perfectionism. Now, perfectionism can come up in different ways, but one of the things I want to focus about with perfectionism is that sometimes it's described as a way of being like, I just want to be the best, and I do get that. That is just a genuine thing, but often it's actually a fear of failure or rejection, um, disguised as perfectionism. The reason why we want to be perfect is because we're scared of what will happen if we're not. Now, that pressure that we add on ourselves can be detrimental on an incredible level. Imagine the situation where thinking like, if I fail, if anything below 100% is failure. That's what perfectionism is. And then the idea is, what does failure mean to me? What does it mean about who I am in society, who I am to my friends, family, who I am to myself, who I am in terms of my value? If I feel to myself that I can't perform any less than 100%, and then I do, and I perform at 98%, for example. There's a book called Will by Will Smith, and he talks about it. He, if if something isn't 100%, it's 0%. And that pressure can really drive you crazy. It can drive you nuts. There's no scale to it. There's no idea of growth. You either win or you've lost. And in some cases, that might be the situation. But when we apply that to everything, it means that there's a certain level of stress that can actually add to this idea of burnout. And it's important to acknowledge, because we often, I think, in celebrate this idea of perfectionism, overachieving, um, perseverance, and things like that, when it can actually be our downfall. So, in terms, one thing I would like to say though is seeking help, because I find that when it comes to burnout, part of what happens is, especially if you're a giver, if you're someone who's always been the person that people come to for help, you might find it difficult asking for help. And this is something I've noticed. You've been that person. You've been the first born in your family, so you've always looked after your siblings. You've taken on more than you needed to. So all the way through life, you're the person who people come to, because if you need something done, give it to the busiest person. And you're the busiest person because you put that pressure in yourself to be able to hold up the entire team, the entire family, the entire community that you serve. And you've always been that person. When you've been that person and you need help, my mom always says, who's there to comfort the comforter? Who's there to help the helper? Um, the problem is, if we're not able to vocalize that you need help, people genuinely may not know, and they may not see the symptoms. I remember seeing uh, Simon Sinek, the author of Start With Why, was in an interview, and he talked about the idea that he had a friend who needed him once, and he found out after the fact, and he was really upset with her, and he went to ask her, why didn't she ask him for help? And she said, I did. And he said, show me. And so they went through the messages and stuff, and she said, okay, here's an example. And it was her messaging to him, um, what are you up to? And he's like, how would I know that that's your cry for help? Like, that just sounds like a normal thing. So they came up with a way um, to say that you need help without saying that you need help, because apparently statistically, it takes what was it? It takes 7 minutes or something with someone who's close to you, someone who you love and you care about, to ease yourself in your nervous system, to calm you down, to heal effectively. And so their new term was, do you have 7 minutes? And that was their way to do it. And For you, your example might be something different. How can you? I've got a friend of mine who is going through a lot at the moment, and we've decided that one of the ways that we can do it is that we're going to send each other emoticons, um, or gifts or something like that when you're in that space where you need help. And each of these gifts will have a different meaning. So, for example, there might be one which is like just an exclamation mark, which is an emergency, for example, right? It might be a heart, which means that you just need attention, you need support, you just need someone to recognize that you're there. You know, it might be a phone, which means that actually, as soon as you get a chance, call me. Whatever that might be. I've got another friend of mine where we've got the traffic light, which is green is that everything is cool. Amber means that you're kind of you're not great, but you're not terrible either, but just check in on me from time to time. And then red is call me immediately. You know, um, so the idea of it, if you're struggling with actually asking for help, is finding ways to communicate clearly that you're in need of something without necessarily having to go through the whole thing, which may be out of your comfort zone to do. Finding small ways to do it, because what ends up happening is it's a vicious cycle. And another friend of mine went through this, is where you realize in that moment there's no one, but you have created the safe space that you feel like you can go to when you need help. And so when you need help and you feel like you can't go to someone for help, then you don't go to them for help, which means that you end up having to deal with it yourself. But then if you actually need that 7 minutes of connection or affection or someone to listen to you, etc., you don't get that in your time of need. And when you don't get that in your time of need, it adds to the pressure. It adds to the negative feeling. It adds to that burnout. And then you need it even more. But then you can't go to someone for that. And so it adds to it even more, right? You can hear the emergency services in the background. That's how serious it can be sometimes, right? But then sometimes all it needs is having that communication to break that cycle. You know, the last thing I want to talk about is the idea of strategies for prevention and long-term effects. So we, through the course of these 31 days, I'm going to be talking about different elements of this. If you're on LinkedIn, you can join me in the Ickdane Burnout series. It's UK time. It's 7 p.m. every Wednesday, but I'm not sure, depending on where you are in the world, it might be a different time for you. But there's also going to be, I've now learnt, this is, how to transcribe and everything. So there's going to be notes and stuff for the ones that you might have missed. And it won't be the only time I'm doing that series, but it might be the only time I'm doing this 31 days. The reason why I'm pointing that out is that sometimes we actually just do need help. And sometimes once we realize what the situation is, it's a lot clearer to know what we need to do. But the important thing is what to do once we're okay. Because another thing I've noticed is this vicious cycle of, okay, I am great, and so I don't need to do anything. I don't do anything, and then I accept more things to do, and more things happen in my life. Some things I have control over, some things I can't. I don't have control over, but it becomes overwhelming. The overwhelm leads to stress. The stress, without thinking about the coping mechanisms for it, becomes prolonged stress and burnout. And then I start to experience the emotional exhaustion, the emotional detachment, the lower sense of personal achievement, the overwhelm. And then once it gets to that point, then I hit a wall and I completely stop functioning, whether it's physically, emotionally, mentally. I shut down. And it's at that point where it's an emergency that I start to do the coping mechanisms again. And then I start to feel better. And then what happens when you start to feel better is that you stop using the coping mechanisms. And then what happens is, once you stop using the coping mechanisms and things start happening, you start to feel worse. And then the cycle continues again. So the idea is the coping mechanisms you use when you're at the depths is what you should continue to use when you're at the heights. So some of those coping mechanisms will look like mindfulness, realistic goals, maintaining healthy diet and fitness and things like that. Your work I don't like work-life balance because I genuinely feel like it separates work from life, but I feel like work is a subset of like, I prefer using work-play balance. For me, that's a little bit better of a balance. There's stuff that you do for work, which has an outcome, stuff you do for play, which doesn't have an outcome. It's just for fun. And both of them are underneath life. They're all part of life, as opposed to life being one thing and work being equal level on another thing. I don't like that idea. So it's having a healthy work-play balance. It's having good connections and fostering healthy relationships and safe spaces with people where you can talk, right? Looking through your contact list and saying, you know, who can I call when things go wrong, when I really need somebody? And if there's no one on your list that comes up to mind, start investing in people to create the environment where you can, because you will need it. We're human. We're not built for silos. We're not built to be completely isolated from one another. We need that connection. We need that help. There's something I saw recently where it was a conversation we're saying, oh, I love myself, so I don't need anybody to love me. And what I say to that is, using the idea of the Johari window. And if you're not familiar with the Johari window, it's a table. And on the top, you have what you know about yourself. And the next column is what you don't know about yourself. And in one row, in the rows, you have what other people know about you. And then another row is what they don't know about you. Now that ends up having 4 squares, right? So in the first square, what you know about you and what other people know about you is what is open, what is revealed. Everybody knows it, right? It's you wear it on your sleeve. There's no confusion there. The other box is what you know about you, but other people don't know about you, and that's what's hidden. So it's the things you might feel shame, guilt. You tend not to talk about too much, right? And you may not even realize you're hiding it. You may think it's quite open, but there's things that your insecurities, your position on certain issues, all that kind of stuff, right? Then there's the idea of what other people know about you that you don't know about you. And that's the thing where it's your blind spots. Those are the things that really, let's say, for example, you're talking to your friendship circle and they're like, oh, yeah, you're the so and so friend. And you're like, what would you mean I'm the so and so friend? I'm not like that. And they said, yeah, you are. They'll give you a whole list of evidence. And you're like, whoa, I've never even realized that I do that. Those things are your blind spots. And then there's the things that you don't know and other people don't know. And that's the great unknown, right? So that's what I call it, the great unknown. That's the things that nobody knows, and it's a surprise to you as well as everyone else when it comes out, because we don't know ourselves completely. The way to reduce the idea of the blind spots, what other people know that you don't know, is that you ask for feedback. So you ask them, like, what am I like in these situations? What have you seen about me? What have you learned? What you don't, how to reduce the area of the hidden places, the things that you don't, that people don't know, is that you share and you find people who you can build safe spaces with to communicate these things with, and not feel shame, not feel guilt, not feel like you have to hide parts of yourself, right? And then the way you reduce the great unknown, the area that nobody knows, is you take on different experiences. You go and do something completely random. You find yourself in another scenario to reveal certain parts of yourself. But why are you telling me about the Johari window, Andre, when it comes to loving yourself? Well, there are going to be certain blind spots. You yourself know certain parts of you that you're going to be able to say, okay, I love this about myself. But what we don't realize, we don't know, there are unknown unknowns, right, about ourselves as our personality. And we can't love the parts that we don't know. And so we actually need other people to reveal that to ourselves. And one of the things that you'll find when you're in a relationship, when you have friendships, when you have all of that kind of stuff, is that you might have heard or you might have said this to someone: I wish you saw yourself the way I see you. And that's because they see something in you that you don't. And so it's really important when it comes to burnout, is finding people you can build these relationships with, where they can reveal things to you that will actually help you feel that sense of accomplishment, feel that sense of affection towards yourself, feel that sense of compassion towards yourself. right? So that you can start to build, fortify this foundation of love around yourself. Because self-love is really important when it comes to burnout. There's self-love, and then there's self-care, right? I find self-care is the doing, the self-love is the being, right? So those things are all elements of yourself that help you build yourself up through burnout. And there's lots of other things as well. Meaning, what is the meaning you attach to yourself and the things that you do, which can help you to um, to get up from the floor, right, and to give you purpose. Because if you feel like you've lost your purpose, that could be another thing that can help you fall, make you fall, like free fall through to the floor of burnout, right? So if there's anything in here that has been useful to you, that there's been interesting, that you've learned more of, put it in the comments. Let me hear your experiences. This particular episode is understanding burnout, what it is and how it affects you. I hope this has given you a better understanding of what burnout actually is and the breadth of it, right? It's not just one thing, it covers a lot of ground. But then also how it affects you and what you can do about it. Again, this is really high level. Over the next 31 days, I'm going to be going through really incremental areas of what we can do about it, how it shows up, self-care practices, looking closer, seeking support, what mindfulness does, what resilience can look like, how you can build connection, recognizing burnout in others and how to help other people who aren't helping themselves, who don't have the capacity sometimes to help themselves. What the role of gratitude has in all of this, boundaries setting and identifying, and things like that. All that kind of stuff we're going to be looking at over the next 31 days. So if this has been valuable to you, share it. Let people know when it's happening. It's going to be 6 a.m. and I know it's really early. It's really early, but for me, it's just part of my morning routine now. So I'm gonna be waking up. I usually wake up around 5 o'clock now, and I do my breakfast and all that kind of stuff. I get myself centered. I think around the topic, um, and then we're going to record at 6 o'clock. Each of the sessions, I was going to say that they're going to be around 20 minutes, but this one is like coming up to 33 minutes already. So I'm not going to stipulate how long these sessions are going to be. It's just going to be at 6 o'clock every morning. I'm going to talk about one topic for the whole month of May, and then I'm going to keep these as a replay. And so this is being streamed live on Instagram, not Instagram, LinkedIn and YouTube. So if you've missed it, you can find the link. This is Ebola Global Coaching on YouTube, and this is Andre Bright in LinkedIn. So thank you so much. Any questions, any thoughts, anything where you're like, "Oh, actually, I like what you said there, but I don't agree," or I need more on this particular element. Any of those things, just comment, DM me. I would love suggestions on what specific things to talk about over the 31 days. I've got a list of topics, but if there's something that comes up which I feel is really, really paramount that I need covered, I would either give it its own session or it can come under one of the other topics as well. So thank you very much for your time. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 6 a.m.